for the school run. But as I delve into the school run, I want to just pause, take a moment, talking about a really important conversation. It's right to have it on the show, but just before I head into it, I do appreciate that it can sometimes be difficult to have these conversations. So I want to give you a trigger warning. We're going to be discussing suicide and suicide prevention for the school run this afternoon, as it is Children's Mental Health Week. So if it is too much to discuss at this time, then do take a time out. We'll be discussing it for at least the next 10 to 15 minutes here on BBC Radio London. If you need support, if you need to speak to someone, you can head to our BBC website, bbc.co.uk/action line. Now, as it is Children's Mental Health Week, I wanted to discuss this conversation. It's an important one. Sometimes we don't quite know the right ways, though, in how we approach this conversation. There's a lot of importance put on supporting young people's emotional well-being in increasingly what is a very complex world, whether it's the rising pressures from social media, academics, expectations. It's fair to say children are facing a lot of stresses that are impacting their mental health from an early age. Well, I'm joined on the line now with Alice Hendy, MBE, who is the founder and CEO of Ripple Suicide Prevention. Alice, pleasure to have you on the show, and thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
I've got to be really straight with you here. There's going to be some individuals tuned into the show who think, goodness me, it's 3:42 in the afternoon and they're talking about some morbid topics on the radio, especially when it comes to children. What would you say to them? Why is it important that we have this conversation?
I'd say actually it goes beyond just being important and actually goes to the level of being life-saving. Having these conversations are just crucial because, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, children out there are struggling with their mental health. There is, as you've just mentioned, huge stresses, huge pressures that they face on a daily basis. And it's down to us to know what we can do to support them and what tools exist out there that might be able to help when things like this occur.
See, that's the point I'd like to talk to you about, is how we can help them. This year's theme, as I mentioned earlier, at Children's Mental Health Awareness Week, is know yourself, grow yourself. And that's an important part there, isn't it? To equip children, to equip young people with the various, mechanisms or even tools to understand themselves and to grow. So what would you want to say to that, and how we can equip our young people to deal with the complexities of life?
Absolutely. It's about the importance really of building supportive relationships and networks. Now, that could look like parents, it could be friends, but it could be someone a bit further afield, like neighbours, like teachers, teaching assistants, anybody who that person has got a good relationship with, that they feel comfortable enough to open up to, is really important to highlight that and to really emphasise the fact that it is okay to talk about how you're feeling. And actually it should be something that's commended and not seen as a sign of weakness.
How should, let's go back to parents for a moment, and then we'll work our way through, as you've mentioned, whether it's teachers and healthcare professionals. How should a parent or a guardian or even a grandparent, anyone, who is an adult who can see that a child that they know that they're caring for is struggling, how do they approach this conversation then?
It's of course very sensitive, and it will vary from child to child as to how that person, likes to be spoken to and the tone and so on and so forth. But ultimately, whoever it is, it's really, really important to open up that conversation. Go somewhere quiet. Ask that young person how they are really doing at the moment. Is there anything going on in their life that is making them feel upset or sad or angry? And try to ask open questions so that you get an open response in return. I think it's also really key to note that there are some amazing resources out there for parents where they can access information, guidance, tips, advice on other things that they can do as well. And one of those things is actually to download the Ripple suicide prevention tool.
Okay.
It's a piece of technology. It's completely free for parents to download at home, and they can download it as a browser extension. Once it's downloaded, it means that if anybody on that computer was to conduct a harmful search that's relating to the topic of self-harm or suicide, the Ripple technology intervenes at that pivotal, crucial moment and instead signposts that young person to immediate 24/7 support that they can access to help themselves both in the moment and also in the longer term as well.
How's about siblings? Because sometimes, look, I think we all know at a certain point, if we reflect upon our own lives, we were all teenagers once. It's not always the case that we turn to our parents, when we were finding things tough. Oftentimes it would be your friends. It may well be your siblings. So how should someone be dealing with that conversation? If you have a piece of information, you don't want to upset the child that's told you, but you obviously want to let a parent know. What do you do in these complex type of situations? As you yourself have said, Alice, it's very sensitive to talk about these things.
It's really sensitive, and this is a particularly difficult question for me because I've lost my sibling to suicide.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And he came to me and mentioned that he was finding things tough, but I never really knew the true extent of that because he didn't go into huge amounts of detail, to be honest with you. And I think really looking back, what would have been fantastic is if I'd have known some of the signs to look out for in my loved ones. So, for instance, it's not just about someone's mood and if they're moody or if they're withdrawn. It can actually take other forms as well, like physical forms. Are they not making much of an effort anymore with their appearance? Have they stopped washing and become more unhygienic? Are they withdrawing from friends? Are they spending a lot more time on the internet or online? Are they not wanting to go out and do things that before they used to enjoy? There's so many different aspects to this. And of course, every person is completely different. But I think just looking out for anything that differs from the norm, whether that's mood, appearance, emotions, is really, really important. But from a sibling's perspective, they've got an important role, haven't they? Because parents, as you say, that you might feel like you're worrying your parents and you don't want to do that. Whereas a sibling is a little bit more on your wavelength, perhaps more, your age group and age range. And perhaps they've also been through something similar to what you're feeling as well. So whoever it is, whether it's a sibling or someone else that you trust, it's really important to make that step and to open up.
And also, you mentioned, didn't you, Alice, that even teachers, healthcare professionals, these kind of conversations can be had at any time if a child feels open enough to be able to have that. What kind of recommendations are there for anyone tuned in? Because I was keen to speak to you today as part of our school run segment where, I do really during this period of time feel it's important for parents, for just adults in general to know what young people are dealing with and talking about. So what help is there? Is there much available in schools around this?
Well, firstly, Ripple is also available at schools, again, completely free for schools, colleges and universities to download en masse to safeguard their students and young people. So I think that would be the first step. But also there are some amazing charities and organisations out there that exist that can offer a range of mental health support in different formats. We often think of mental health support as just something that's able to be given over the telephone. And actually, that's not the case. We've got the text service provided by Shout, where young people can text and speak to a mental health professional 24 hours a day about how they're doing. We've got the Calm web chat facility that exists. There's apps that young people can download as well. And a couple that I recommend is the Hub of Hope and also Grassroots Staying Alive. I've got a great app as well. Those are things that young people can download on their devices and really try to look after themselves by noting down how they're feeling, talking about potential action plans if things get tough, and it gives them a whole host of information and guidance around how they can improve their mental health going forward as well. So there's lots out there. It's just knowing where to find it.
Alice, how long has Ripple Suicide Prevention been around?
I lost Josh in November of 2020, 25th of November 2020, and I found that Josh had been looking at harmful material on the internet around how he could end his life. And so in response to that, I built Ripple to intervene for anybody else who might be going through something similar. And I launched that in September of 2021. And it's fantastic for us to say, but since that point, we've now had just under 2 million downloads of our technology around the world.
Wow.
Yeah, and it blows my mind every day. And we've intercepted over 70,000 harmful online searches from people who are struggling and finding things difficult.
I'm taken back by that, because it's so important. And Alice, the work that you, the organisation, are doing, not just in the UK, but across the world, as you say, is quite literally helping people on a daily basis deal with their own tragedies, but also if they've lost a family member, looking out for support and having that, because the important, you've said it a couple of times now, your devices, if it's a young person, a lot of the times you will find that they have these devices and you don't realise what they're looking at on a regular basis.
Exactly that. And, as parents, how many of us really know what kind of content they're actually being subject to on apps like TikTok or when they're conducting Google searches? So it's really, really important to keep an eye on that, show an interest in what they're looking at online, even gaming also, not just kind of scrolling on phones, and actually having that courage to start that conversation about their mental health. It's tough, but it's so needed, and you might just be surprised by the response, actually. Yeah,
just because it's tough doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, right?
Absolutely.
And I hope that you're able to come into the studio next time. I'd like to find out more about the work that you're doing. People can go to ripplesuicideprevention.com for more details. Alice, a real pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for joining me.